I think he'll change. He is committed of his own level of service, and that will remain.
The royal world is spinning after a jaw-dropping shock shakes the palace at its core. A man who's been standing right beside Princess Anne for years, quiet, watchful, and holding back, has finally broken his silence. For so long, he's seen the battles for power raging inside those palace walls, but now he's dropped a secret so dark about Queen Camilla that it could destroy the way the public sees her forever. This revelation isn't just gossip. It's a bomb that could rip open cracks in the monarchy itself. Why did he stay silent all this time? And why now, of all moments, did he finally let it out? The timing feels explosive, like someone wanted the world to see the truth when it would hurt the most. Get ready, because what Princess Anne's husband just revealed about Camilla's deepest, darkest secret could change royal history. And it all ties back to an old rift between two women forever linked by blood and duty. Two women bound by family, yet worlds apart in who they are. That clash has fueled years of tension that never truly cooled down. That's the raw truth behind Princess Anne and Queen Camilla's rocky bond. Their story was never about sisterly love or shared loyalty. It was rivalry from the start, a rivalry that still haunts the palace halls today. Suspicion, whispers, and unspoken grudges have been the markers of their relationship for decades. But make no mistake, this discord didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's been boiling beneath the surface since the 1970s, tied to one of the most tangled love stories in royal history. Back then, Princess Anne was romantically linked to Andrew Parker Bowles, and despite royal rules blocking marriage because of his Catholic faith, there was real affection between them. But fate had another twist. Andrew reunited with Camilla and the two tied the knot in 1973. Imagine Anne, forced to smile through palace events, while the woman who married her ex-lover stood just steps away. The sting was real, and it planted the seeds of a grudge that never faded, shaping a rivalry that would shadow both women for years. But Camilla didn't stop at taking Anne's former flame. She went even further by marrying Anne's own brother, Charles, more than 3 decades later. That twist turned an old wound into a scar that never healed. Those early romantic entanglements left Princess Anne with a bitter taste that time never managed to erase. Insiders whisper that Camilla carried a quiet unease around Anne for years, almost as if Anne's sharp presence left her rattled. Instead of finding common ground, Camilla often chose to completely shut her out, pretending she wasn't even in the room. That coldness only widened the rift between them. Fast forward to King Charles's coronation, and the drama took a new turn. Camilla began insisting on being addressed simply as Queen, rather than the traditional title of Queen Consort. And if there's one thing guaranteed to spark Anne's fury, it's watching someone break royal protocol right in front of her eyes. Anne wasn't about to let Camilla rewrite history. She cut straight to the point, bluntly declaring that Camilla was not the Queen, but only the Queen's consort. That single statement lit a fire, and tensions between the two women grew hotter than ever. Sure, when the cameras were flashing, both Anne and Camilla put on their polite royal masks, but everyone could see it was nothing more than a show. Behind those palace walls, the frost in the air was impossible to hide. Years after her romance with Andrew Parker Bowles faded into the past, Princess Anne found a new chapter of love with Sir Timothy Laurence. Their wedding was beautiful, and he became her rock through decades of royal storms. Yet fate had bigger plans, because Sir Timothy would later stumble upon the darkest secret hidden inside the monarchy itself. But who exactly is Sir Timothy? And how did a man once serving as Vice Admiral of the Royal Navy, disciplined, fearless, and never easily shaken, end up holding secrets powerful enough to threaten the very foundation of the crown? Sir Timothy carried himself with the sharp discipline of a man who had spent a lifetime at sea, calm, steady, and unshaken. Since stepping into royal life in 1992, he kept a low profile, never chasing attention. His mission was simple: protect and support the monarchy while staying far away from palace drama. But by 2025, that careful distance was no longer possible. Timothy suddenly found himself right in the thick of the storm, unable to turn away from what he was seeing. For years, he had quietly stood back, watching Camilla's influence grow stronger inside the royal household. At first, he brushed off Anne's sharp remarks, thinking it was just her famously tough personality showing through. But then, slowly, a chilling realization set in. Timothy began noticing a disturbing pattern in Camilla's behavior, something that went far beyond simple annoyance or personality clashes. It was darker, more calculated, and impossible for him to keep ignoring. What Timothy uncovered wasn't random. It was calculated. Every move Camilla made seemed like another rung on the ladder, a carefully plotted climb straight to the top. And once Timothy started connecting the dots, the picture became alarmingly clear. The trail went back decades, Camilla's tangled romances slowly pulling her deeper into the royal circle. Her affair with Charles didn't just shake the palace, it blew it wide open. That scandal ripped apart his marriage to Diana, igniting a public firestorm that nearly brought the monarchy crashing down. The fallout was devastating. Charles and Diana's divorce, followed by Diana's tragic death. Events that left scars on the monarchy that never healed. For Anne, who lived by duty and family loyalty, these betrayals were impossible to forgive. In her eyes, Camilla was unworthy of the crown she eventually claimed. And then came the whispers from Andrew Parker Bowles himself, private words shared with Timothy. Andrew confided that Camilla had often ignored her own children, instead throwing herself deeper into Charles and Diana's marriage. To Anne, this was the final proof that Camilla's rise wasn't just ruthless, it was heartless. But the past was only part of the story. Timothy soon realized the real danger was happening right now. While Princess Anne stayed loyal in her marriage, Timothy's sharp eyes picked up on something shifting in Camilla's behavior the moment King Charles's health began to decline. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable, but Timothy caught it. In private meetings and family gatherings, the mask of the supportive consort started to slip away. Camilla wasn't just standing by the king anymore. She was speaking for him, stepping into his role like she already owned it. Her voice crept into conversations about the Regency Act and even succession planning, territory that no consort was supposed to touch. She carried herself less like a companion at her husband's side and more like a queen in waiting, a monarch preparing to seize the throne the moment opportunity struck. Camilla's habit of handing out advice where it wasn't wanted began raising eyebrows. She lectured William, and especially Kate, about their royal duties, as if she were the one shaping their roles. To Timothy, it looked like blatant overreach, but to Anne, it was nothing short of infuriating. The deeper insult, though, hit far closer to home: Camilla's control over King Charles's time. Hiding behind the excuse of protecting his peace, she increasingly blocked family visits. Anne would come home furious after yet another cancelled meeting with her brother, convinced Camilla was deliberately cutting her out. Even small family gatherings at Clarence House began shrinking, with Anne mysteriously absent from the guest list more and more often. It wasn't just neglect. It felt calculated, as if Camilla was quietly isolating Charles from the people closest to him. And yet, Timothy soon realized this was only the beginning of something far more alarming. Timothy began to pick up on something even more troubling: Camilla's poisonous way with words. Behind closed doors, she would whisper cutting remarks to Charles, saying things like, "Anne is so busy with her horses and charities. She doesn't understand the pressures of real leadership like we do." Those sly digs weren't casual. They were meant to chip away at Anne's standing. And it didn't stop there. To courtiers, Camilla confided so-called concerns about William, suggesting he was far too modern for the crown. On the surface, it sounded like worry, but once filtered, Timothy saw it for what it truly was: a calculated attempt to cast doubt on the very man destined to inherit the throne. Every word was a move in a bigger game, an effort to make Camilla look like the king's one true and trustworthy ally, while quietly undercutting everyone else around him. And then came the media blitz, loud, flashy, and impossible to miss. Timothy couldn't ignore the glowing headlines suddenly splashed across papers, praising Camilla's steadfast leadership and calling her the Queen, holding the monarchy together. The problem? These flattering stories shined a spotlight on Camilla's supposed strength, while conveniently brushing aside Anne's decades of tireless service and the increasing responsibilities shouldered by William and Kate. To Timothy, it was too obvious. This wasn't coincidence, it was a campaign. Every headline read like it had been polished by Camilla's own allies, carefully designed to push her higher in the public eye while dimming everyone else around her. And when Anne saw these stories, her fury boiled over, making it crystal clear to Timothy that this was no accident, but a dangerous power play unfolding right before his eyes. All of these moments piled up on Timothy's mind. One by one, they might have been brushed aside, but together they created a crushing weight of suspicion and distrust. And then came Royal Ascot 2025, the day everything changed. The event was dazzling on the surface, the thundering horses, cheering crowds, and cameras flashing everywhere. But behind the glamour, King Charles looked frail, pale, and drained of strength, his decline on full display for those close enough to see. Timothy, standing just steps away, caught something that froze him in place. Camilla leaned in close to one of her advisors and whispered words so chilling he could hardly believe them. "This throne must remain in my hands forever. No matter what happens to Charles." That single whisper cut through the noise of the crowd. It wasn't loyalty Timothy heard, it was ambition laid bare. Those words stopped Timothy cold. A chill ripped through him, sharper than any storm he had ever faced during his years at sea. In that moment, Camilla was no longer just a complicated in-law. She revealed herself as a direct threat to both the king and the crown itself. For the very first time, Timothy saw the danger for what it really was. This wasn't just palace drama. It was ambition that could shift the entire future of the monarchy. He knew instantly that he couldn't stay silent. He had to act, and act fast. And so, Timothy began digging for answers, determined to uncover the truth. But what he would find behind the glittering walls of Clarence House and Buckingham Palace was a double-edged sword. Truth powerful enough to protect the throne, yet dangerous enough to shatter it forever. Most whispers in the palace fade before the public ever hears them, but not this one. Camilla's secret was too dark, too venomous, and far too dangerous to stay buried forever. So Timothy quickly realized that what he overheard wasn't just an offhand remark. It was the outline of a master plan, built on years of careful deception. This wasn't about support or loyalty. It was a calculated power play designed with chilling precision. What he uncovered was nothing less than a double-edged sword, a scheme to keep King Charles bound to the throne, even as his strength faded, while ensuring Camilla's grip on power never slipped from her hands. And the timing couldn't have been more alarming. Charles had barely worn the crown for 3 years when his health began to collapse, sparking deep concern inside the palace and across the nation. For Timothy, the danger was suddenly clear. The monarchy itself was hanging by a thread. When Charles began chemotherapy, the once confident king was reduced to a frail, weary figure, a shadow of his former self. To the outside world, it looked like nothing more than the cruel toll of illness. But behind palace walls, Timothy discovered a truth far darker than anyone imagined. Whispers pointed to Camilla allegedly pressuring the king's own physician into a disturbing compromise, demanding his chemotherapy dosage be cut back. Not enough to end his life, but just enough to leave him weakened, drained, and fully dependent. It was a chilling tactic, a monarch alive in body, but stripped of the strength to rule with authority. The cruelty was staggering. According to shocking evidence, Camilla's intentions couldn't have been clearer. She wanted Charles preserved for the public eye, able to smile for cameras and wave when needed, but kept frail and powerless in private, ensuring her dominance remained unchallenged. Her alleged words cut like ice. "Keep him alive for the cameras, but weak for me." That single line revealed a ruthless strategy that shook Timothy to his core. If you slip, if you speak, I'll ruin you and your family. Those alleged threats sent shockwaves through the palace. If reports are true, this wasn't the cry of a grieving partner, but a cold calculation from someone hungry for power. The narrative paints a picture of a doctor trapped between duty and fear, pushed into choices that may have compromised care under pressure. If the medical claims hold up, reports say the consort leaned on the king's physician to ease chemotherapy doses, not to kill, but to keep him weak and dependent, kept fit for show but too frail to fight back. That alleged tactic would be chilling, a move to keep a monarch alive for appearances while stealing real authority behind the scenes. And it didn't stop there. Sources claim the plan stretched to finance and control, pressuring the king into signing power of attorney papers that looked harmless on the surface, but could strip Princess Anne of key financial protections. If true, the fallout would be devastating for family and crown alike. The documents, according to shocking claims, weren't routine paperwork at all. They allegedly funneled control of Princess Anne's charitable funds and inherited assets straight into Camilla's grasp. These were not just numbers in an account, but treasures entrusted by the late Queen Elizabeth II herself and reinforced by the sovereign grant. What a betrayal, if true. For Anne, this wasn't about money. It was about legacy, loyalty, and decades of independence. Those funds kept hospitals alive, fueled community programs, and breathed life into her beloved equestrian charities. To see them stripped away would cut deeper than any financial blow. And critics say the alleged move wasn't about helping the crown. It was about consolidating raw, unchecked power. Camilla wasn't just enriching herself. If these reports are true, she was striking at the very soul of Princess Anne's mission. Edward Thompson, a humble servant at Clarence House, had spent years living in the shadows of whispered threats and hushed commands. He had seen enough to know something wasn't right, yet fear kept him silent. After all, who dares challenge royalty? But then came the moment that changed everything. When Edward allegedly overheard Camilla unleashing chilling threats upon the king's physician, words sharp enough to wound without a blade, his fear cracked. Sources say his hands trembled as he slipped his phone into his jacket pocket, secretly recording every word. That single, daring act transformed Edward from a silent bystander into the most unlikely of guardians, holding evidence that could shake the monarchy at its very core. When Sir Timothy received the secret recording, he later confessed it felt like a cold punch straight to the chest. This was no longer rumour, no longer suspicion whispered in corridors. It was evidence, undeniable, dangerous, and damning. For Timothy, the weight of that video was crushing. In his hands lay more than just scandal. It was the key to exposing Camilla's alleged hunger for power, now crossing into criminal shadows. The decision before him was terrifying. To reveal the truth meant risking the monarchy's collapse. To remain silent meant allowing its slow poisoning from within. The stakes were no longer about Charles's fading health, or even Anne's legacy. The crown itself hung in the balance. It was no longer just about money, power, or influence. It was about the very soul of the crown itself, a symbol millions across the globe still clung to with reverence. And yet, even with that crushing weight on his conscience, Sir Timothy sensed the battle was only beginning. If Camilla had already coerced doctors, manipulated the king, and threatened his family, then what darker depths might she still be prepared to reach? Summoning every ounce of courage, Timothy resolved to do the unthinkable. He would take the truth directly to the king. But how would Charles react to learning that the enemy who sought to weaken him had been lying beside him in his own bed? When the revelation finally broke upon King Charles, it did not land as one strike, but as a relentless series of blows, shattering waves crashing mercilessly against a body already frail and failing. His heart collapsed beneath the weight of the revelation, not only from the sting of betrayal, but from the brutal mirror it held up to his own blindness. For decades, Charles had poured his energy into legitimizing Camilla, battling his family's disapproval, defying the church's resistance, and weathering the storm of public outrage. He had stood immovable, declaring time and again that his love for her was steadfast, unshakable, eternal. Now, to learn that the woman he had defended so fiercely, the very person for whom he had risked his crown's dignity, had been the source of his frailty, his decline, and perhaps his ruin, was agony almost too crushing to endure. Memories surged back, laced with bitterness sharp enough to wound. He saw his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, her expression always lined with quiet disapproval whenever Camilla's name was spoken aloud. The recollections were piercing. The day he had first brought Camilla into royal circles, the strained silences that followed, the wedding where his mother had deliberately avoided posing for photographs with them. Those small, deliberate gestures had carried the weight of judgment. The Queen had never embraced Camilla. She had merely endured her presence. Yet Charles, blinded by devotion, had dismissed it all as the rigid conservatism of an older monarch unwilling to yield to modernity. Now, he wondered if it had been foresight, not prejudice. But with this revelation, his mother's judgment no longer felt like disapproval. It loomed like a prophecy fulfilled. Perhaps Elizabeth had always seen what he stubbornly refused to acknowledge. Perhaps she had recognized, long before him, that Camilla was never bound by devotion, but by something colder, sharper, more calculating. His mind drifted back to the endless months in his sick room, his body frail under the weight of chemotherapy. He remembered her presence at his bedside, the gentle hand curled around his, the soft voice whispering reassurance in the quiet hours. Yet now, those memories curdled. How many of those whispers had been veiled lies? How many of those tender touches nothing more than performances, carefully staged for a man too blinded by love to question them? The realization hollowed him to the core. His body had already betrayed him through illness, but his spirit had endured, anchored in the belief that his partner was loyally by his side. In an instant, that fragile illusion shattered, leaving nothing but emptiness in its place. Yet it was not the personal betrayal that crushed him most. Even more than the deception, what gnawed at Charles's soul was the thought of how the palace would absorb this truth. His children, his sister, his closest advisors, each had endured sacrifices for him, rallying in loyalty when he needed them most. Now, he wondered, had it all been in vain? And now, because of his own choices, the burden of shame would fall not just on him, but on those he loved most. His family would be forced to endure the scandal his devotion had unleashed. For a man who had spent his entire life preparing for the crown, the weight of kingship now pressed down like never before. And for the first time since his coronation, Charles doubted whether he had the strength or even the right to continue wearing it. But if his reign was faltering, the question became unavoidable. How would his heir face what came next? The answer was swift. Prince William's reaction was immediate, volcanic in its force. Usually a man of measured words and careful composure, the future king's restraint shattered the moment the recording of Camilla's threats echoed before him. As he listened to Camilla's voice dripping with venom, William's expression transformed. First, his face blanched to ash, then flared crimson with a fury too fierce to restrain. To him, this was not mere betrayal. It was nothing short of an attempted assassination, carried out through a slow, merciless poisoning of his father for the sake of a crown. But anger quickly hardened into resolve. Rising above the shock, William straightened, his voice steady and commanding. In that moment, he no longer spoke only as a son in grief, but as the heir who would protect both his father and the throne with unshakable authority. William declared that this was no longer a matter to be hushed within palace walls. It was a full-blown legal crisis demanding swift, merciless justice. Armed with undeniable evidence, he seized command of the situation, no longer just the heir, but the protector of the realm. Yet where William blazed with fury, Anne crumbled beneath the weight of sorrow. The Princess Royal, so often unyielding and iron-willed, broke down as the truth unfolded. Her tears were not born of fragility, but of a fierce, wounded love. A sister's anguish at watching her brother cruelly deceived, his devotion weaponized against him. In Anne's grief, the entire room felt the depth of Charles's betrayal and the enormity of the crown's shame. She could not stop her mind from drifting to their mother's final wishes. Queen Elizabeth's quiet determination to shield Anne's independence, ensuring that her charitable funds and assets would remain forever beyond manipulation. To see Camilla now scheming to strip that legacy away was almost unbearable, a violation not only of trust, but of the Queen's memory itself. Yet grief soon hardened into iron resolve. Wiping her tears, Anne rose beside William, her presence steady and commanding. No barrister, no advisor could speak with the authority she carried. With fire in her voice, she invoked the weight of their mother's will, the decades of service it represented, and the undeniable illegitimacy of Camilla's attempted theft. As the case unfolded before them, the Royal Council, composed of senior advisors, legal experts, and a select circle of confidants who had once served the late Queen, sat in heavy silence. For nearly 3 tense hours, they weighed the political and legal fallout of what they had just heard. Could such a revelation ever be brought to the public eye? Would exposing Camilla risk shattering the monarchy's already delicate image in a skeptical modern world? Yet the mounting evidence allowed no escape. Even the most cautious voices, men and women who had built their reputations on restraint, conceded that if Camilla's scheme were permitted to continue unchecked, it would not merely bring ruin upon Charles, but would unravel the very crown itself. Hesitations slowly dissolved. Doubts, once whispered, grew quiet. One after another, the wavering voices fell into alignment. By the time the debate reached its close, the chamber no longer spoke in fragments. The council stood united as one. Camilla would be stripped of every executive duty and all financial control. Every charitable trust, every estate, and every asset she had sought to claim would be taken from her grasp and returned to Princess Anne, now safeguarded under the joint stewardship of Anne and William. From that moment forward, Camilla's power was reduced to nothing more than a shadow. She would remain queen consort in title alone, her position ceremonial, her influence hollow. The council's final decree was resolute. This scandal, and the evidence behind it, must never reach the public eye. The monarchy's very survival now rested upon secrecy. To reveal that the queen consort herself had plotted against the king would invite dangerous questions about the king's strength and judgment. Thus, the decision was made. The truth would remain forever sealed behind palace walls. Everything had been resolved, except for one looming reality. Camilla remained unaware of how completely her world was about to collapse. And when a queen consort learns that her darkest secret has been uncovered, how does she respond? This was the beginning of her downfall. When news finally reached Camilla that her secret had been exposed, most would have expected fear, guilt, or at the very least a display of contrition. But fear never came. Instead, Clarence House shook with the sound of her furious cries. She stormed through the room like a trapped predator, her trembling hands and twisted features betraying a rage that consumed her. For decades, she had clawed her way into the very heart of the monarchy, step by calculated step. To lose it all in an instant was unthinkable. Cornered and desperate, Camilla lashed out, making a reckless move that revealed just how deeply her panic had taken hold. In her desperation, Camilla summoned one of her most trusted aides and delivered a chilling command. Sir Timothy Laurence had to be eliminated. She cast the full blame on him, accusing him of meddling where he should never have dared and of dragging her carefully hidden secrets into the light. But the assassination plot collapsed before it could even begin. Sloppy in execution, it was intercepted swiftly, never coming close to threatening Sir Timothy's life. The discovery of such a reckless scheme only confirmed the council's worst fears. Camilla was no longer simply ambitious, she was dangerous and unhinged. And when word of her failure reached her ears, panic began to strip away the last shreds of her composure. The palace, once her stage for careful schemes and manipulations, now closed in around her like a prison. Every glance from a servant, every whisper in the hall felt like a silent accusation, a threat she could not escape. Restless and consumed by dread, she wandered the endless corridors, her mind spinning through desperate strategies to silence her enemies and reclaim control. Yet each plan crumbled to dust, leading back to the same haunting truth. She had been defeated, but an even colder reckoning awaited her. It arrived not with shouts or confrontation, but in the quiet form of an envelope pressed with the unyielding seal of the Royal Council. With trembling fingers, Camilla broke it open and began to read. The decree was written with chilling detachment, its words stripped of sympathy, clothed only in the cold authority of law. Every executive power she once wielded was revoked, her influence erased. She would remain queen consort in name alone, a hollow title with no weight beyond ceremony. As her eyes scanned each line, the blood drained from her face. Witnesses later recalled how she sat motionless, clutching the document until the paper ripped under the strain of her trembling grip. For decades, she had clawed her way into Charles's life, convinced that fate itself had destined her for the throne. Now, in one merciless stroke, it was gone. Everything she had schemed for vanished. The letter slipped from her grasp, landing softly on the floor. For several moments, she remained frozen, staring into emptiness as if the world around her had ceased to exist. Then, unexpectedly, the tears came. But they were not for Charles, nor for the fractured family she had left in ruins. They were for herself, for the dream that had withered before her eyes. Later that night, standing before her mirror, the reflection that met her was a stranger. She no longer saw a queen in the glass, but only a weary 78-year-old woman with hollow, defeated eyes. By nightfall, Camilla's defiance had vanished, and she locked herself away in her chambers, refusing to admit anyone. The palace that had once served as her stage of triumph now stood as her prison. Her lifelong pursuit of power had not merely slipped away, it had crumbled into ash. She was not banished to exile abroad, nor humiliated before the public. Her punishment was far harsher: to endure her remaining days in suffocating emptiness, trapped within the very walls she had schemed so ruthlessly to command. Though her actions merited a prison cell, fate delivered a far crueler sentence. She was condemned to spend the remainder of her life in emptiness, burdened by the cold contempt of her own family. Thus ended Camilla's story, not in triumph, but in utter defeat. The dark ambition that had driven her for decades was now shattered, leaving behind nothing but a frail woman gazing at her reflection, haunted by the question of whether she had ever truly won anything at all. Do you believe the council's judgment was fitting for her crimes, or should harsher punishment have been delivered? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. What do you think of Camilla's downfall? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more royal revelations. And before you go, click on the next video now showing on your screen. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.